A potential Republican takeover of the House could put new pressure on the Biden administration and on a Republican Speaker of the House to begin impeachment hearings against President Biden. The Atlantic's Barton Gellman details the possibilities in his new article and also names other top Biden officials who could be under the GOP impeachment microscope, as well as the hurdles to reaching consensus on their way forward. Joining me to discuss right now, New York Times Chief White House Correspondent Peter Baker and Jonathan Lemire, host of Way Too Early and Politico's White House Bureau Chief. All right, Jonathan, even Republicans who were interviewed in this article mentioned the Hunter issue, saying things got really vague when pressed for any wrongdoing by the president. And the article also mentions border security, the withdrawal from Afghanistan. How much pressure is McCarthy under to potentially follow through with this?
An extraordinary amount. We hear frequently from members of the Republican House who say that if they take back the majority, we've heard this from Matt Gaetz, we've heard this from Marjorie Taylor Greene and the like, they want to begin these investigations and potentially impeachment proceedings almost immediately. We should be clear, there's never been any evidence of a link between President Biden and any wrongdoing that Hunter Biden may have committed, nor has he been charged with any wrongdoing just yet either. But this is something that does loom over this White House, and I've been reporting this week about their feelings about the upcoming midterms. It's some growing anxiety. They do believe, though publicly they still say they have hope. Privately, the White House and a lot of Democratic allies do think the House is slipping away. It'd be very difficult to retain control of that body, and there's a possibility the Senate could as well. That's sort of deemed as a coin flip right now, a true 50-50 toss-up. But all it takes is the House. If the Republicans grab control of that body of Congress, they will have the subpoena power. They'll be able to carry out a number of investigations, and they could slow things down for this White House trying to prove forward. The risk, though, for Republicans, they could be guilty of overreach. It's possible the public would turn against them.
Well, Peter Baker, some of this is reminiscent of another White House you covered. That was with the impeachment proceedings against Bill Clinton after Newt Gingrich took power. Where do you see parallels here?
Well, I mean, obviously, the one thing we've learned about impeachment from the Clinton impeachment and any of the Trump impeachments is that this is, so far an inadequate measure to genuinely hold a president accountable if that's, in fact, your goal. As long as you don't have 2/3 of your party in the Senate, the notion that you're going to convict a president and remove him from office, even under the most genuinely, outrageous, allegations, is pretty minimal. And therefore, it's a political tool, a political way of attacking a president, that it's no longer a tool of accountability, at least as long as the current system prevails the way it does. So, this would be a way of bringing things to light about President Biden. It may even be a way of exposing wrongdoing if there is any. The kinds of things they're talking about, though, for the most part, are policy differences or performance differences, not the things that normally are thought of as high crimes and misdemeanors. That would turn it to a much more of a parliamentary system where we have a kind of vote of no confidence when Parliament thinks that the leader isn't doing a good job. That they may not think he's doing a good job on the border, on Afghanistan withdrawal or other things like that, but that's not typically considered to be a high crime or misdemeanor. So we may be evolving the system in that sense. But I think Jonathan's point is right, which is that, it's a challenge as well for Kevin McCarthy. Will he actually go along with the far right part of his caucus, even if most of the caucus, frankly, might not want to get him involved in something like this? Investigations are one thing, impeachment's another. And that's a real test for him as well as for President Biden.
So, Jonathan, we talked about how much pressure McCarthy is under, but what about former President Trump? What kind of a player will he be if, again, the Republicans get the House? How much of a player will he be to impeach basically as many Biden officials as possible?
Trump has already signaled that he would support impeachment of Biden officials, Biden cabinet members, and perhaps Biden himself. Trump, of course, impeached twice. He, both times, was acquitted by a Republican-controlled Senate, and that there was not enough votes to send him out of office, certainly not the 2/3. And he, though, has declared that both things were witch hunts, that he did nothing wrong. And we know that certainly we can well point to January 6th and perhaps disagree with that. But he believes because he had to deal with that fate, Joe Biden should as well. And it's, as Peter was saying, any number of things the Republicans may toss out for impeachment, very few of which would actually rise to the historical standard of what would be impeachment, but they may not matter. There's going to be an extraordinary amount of pressure here for the Republicans to do so, whoever the speaker is. Now, McCarthy not guaranteed to have that post. And in fact, as a final point, there are some who have suggested that McCarthy might need to pledge to impeach Biden as a way to garner Trump's endorsement for Speaker, something he has yet to possess.
So, Peter, Jonathan has mentioned this potential overreach, this risk here that Republicans face. What would be the threshold to cross for that in terms of going after impeachment proceedings based on maybe not enough evidence that would rise to the level of a high crime or a misdemeanor? What's the risk that they face with turning off the American people?
Yeah, the other lesson of the impeachments we've seen in modern times, at least since the Nixon case, not counting the Nixon case, is that it hasn't worked out well for the House majority that impeached a president of the other party. It didn't work out well for the Democrats in the 90s politically, and it didn't work out well. It didn't work out with the Republicans in the 90s politically. They lost seats in the 98 midterm election, didn't make the 2000 elections turn on that. And it didn't work out particularly well for the Democrats in the election that followed the first impeachment of President Trump in 2020, where they lost seats to Republicans in the House election. Obviously, the Democrats did defeat Trump in the presidential election. So, there's a real risk here, as Jonathan says, of overreach. There's a risk that the public won't necessarily go along with it, but partisans will. And there's such a thirst for revenge on the part of Trump and his base that it doesn't matter that they would not succeed in actually removing President Biden, or that they might even take a risk at the polls. It's worth doing it from their point of view, simply to get tit for tat. It's you did it to us, we're going to do it to you. And that's what politics has come to right now in America.
All right, Peter Baker, Jonathan Lemire, thank you.